All right. Well, Canelo Alvarez trainer Eddie Reynoso says that they are open to moving to 160 pounds for one person and one person alone, and that is Errol Spence Jr. Jamal Charlo, he's willing to fight, but he's got to go to 168 pounds. Let's talk about that amazing development in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So, Canelo Alvarez and Eddie Reynoso can do math. Thank you. And they are also recognizing that there is a guy out there that is their biggest payday without a doubt. And as a result, they are willing to do something for that man that they're not willing to do for anybody else, which is to fight him at a weight class that Canelo's already a champion in. I will not talk about that aspect of it in this video because I want to be pro Canelo, because there's a whole lot of people that think I don't like Canelo. That's not true. I think Canelo Alvarez is an excellent fighter. I think that he is a highly skilled fighter and that he would fight anybody that you put in front of him because he's like that. But the people around him, I don't have the same confidence about. But at least we know now that they are willing to acknowledge Errol Spence Jr. and the status of Errol Spence Jr. in the sport, because Errol is the biggest fight for Canelo. And when Errol first started asking for the fight for Canelo, I thought to myself, well, this is easy. There's no way that anybody will have an issue with this. You clearly see that Errol Spence Jr. is the man at 147 pounds. I mean, literally below the weight of 147 pounds. Errol is the biggest thing in all in boxing. Easy. There's nobody close to him at 147 or below. And quite honestly, if you look at the real numbers coming out last year in 2020, he's the biggest fighter, period. If you look at the money that he's actually generating in the year 2022, and then think that he's got many other matchups that he can do the same thing in, but in Dallas, Texas, with a stadium full of 120,000 people. So at least by saying this, that when Eddie's like, everybody else got to go to 168, and it's an interview with Ellie Sethback, everybody else, yeah, Charlo's a great fight. Benavidez is a great fight. All these guys are great fights. And I like that Eddie Reynoso said that, because I liking Eddie Reynoso. I don't want to dislike Eddie Reynoso. I like Ryan Garcia. I like Canelo Alvarez. I'm hoping that he does very, very well with Andy Ruiz. I think that Eddie Reynoso is one of the best trainers in boxing and appears to be coming up behind a guy like, what's his name? Nacho Beristain, that has so much respect in Mexico for what he's done. What he does training fighters like Juan Manuel Marquez and others. So I like Eddie Reynoso, but when my first take is when I hear people talk about how nobody can beat Canelo and Canelo is the greatest fighter in the world, he's the #1 pound for pound without a question, I give him the #1 and #2 spots. No, you do not. You have not seen that dude fight anybody in the last couple years. You haven't. But even if you do give him the #1 and the 2 spot, if you got a guy standing there at #4 that wants to fight him, then why not? Especially if they're close to the same weight class. But a whole lot of people were like, oh, no, Canelo can't make 160. Yes, Canelo can make 160 because Canelo Alvarez is the 160-pound champion, and Eddie Reynoso just said he can make 160 for Errol. He's not going to 160 for Jamal. Why wouldn't he want to go to 160 for Jamal? Because Jamal will beat the brakes off him if he feels any way weakened by a weight loss that makes him cut muscle. Okay? But the truth of the matter is that they don't want to fight Jamal. And that's because more than likely the train is going to stop if he runs into Jamal Charlo. Because Jamal Charlo has that look of, that's the guy that's going to beat him, written all over him. The size, the length, the jab, the fighting style, the fact that he's been looking and watching Canelo for all of these years. That's the guy that he's not going to fight at 160, where Jamal is actually a champion. So there's still a good amount of funny business going on here and maneuvering and talking because, really, until the fight happens, who knows? However, Eddie Reynoso starting to sound a lot more like Bernard Hopkins was when Bernard Hopkins said that Errol was asking for the fight. He's like, Errol is probably maybe he's just clout chasing, wants his name to be part of the scenario. I mean, I'll believe that when I see it. I can't see him moving up and fight. Do you know how big Canelo is at 160? I was like, yeah, I know how big he is. He's as big as an X154. So as long as Errol has a fight if he has one fight at 160, then let his body adjust, get used to fighting some of the bigger guys and go on in there and fight them. And I know fighting bigger guys and sparring isn't the same thing, but I've seen him spar. And I can promise you that big old 175, 180-pound dude that he was sparring felt all of that, okay? He felt all of it. And he was much, much bigger, but he was feeling all of that. Errol's a real fighter, man, who has a real chance to beat Canelo Alvarez. That said, in this fight, Canelo Alvarez would obviously be the favorite to win the fight. I would pick Canelo to win. I think it's something around a 55-45 fight. I don't think it's anywhere near like the blowout that some people are talking about. Like it's just not going to be competitive. There's no way. Well, and you know that they probably don't believe that either. Because if they thought that, I'm not sure how I can trust people that told me with a straight face that Canelo Alvarez versus Callum Smith was going to be a close fight. That was a fight that, where it was a Canelo against the best guy at 168. No, it wasn't. I watched Callum Smith fight multiple times. I knew exactly what was going to happen in that fight. Callum Smith is nothing special about Callum Smith, except for if you mean like in a UK domestic level, he would definitely be the top guy out of the UK at 168, right? Maybe if he beats Billy Joe Saunders. And I don't even know if Callum Smith beats Billy Joe Saunders, to tell you the truth. It just seems like, hey, man, it's just a way that they get those UK dudes major championship titles, right? And they kind of, give them shots at it, and then they wind up being food for the guy that they're fighting. So I'm not sure where people tell me, Errol will get destroyed. I mean, dude, you told me Callum Smith was going to be a tough fight. So like I said, I cannot really take you serious in this regard. Now, if the way that I would like to see things play out for Canelo Alvarez and Errol Spence Jr. is this. I would like to see Errol Spence Jr. fight Manny Pacquiao next, if he could get it, which he won't, and then Terrence Crawford, right? And that's a year. After that, the whole 147 is wrapped up. After that, Canelo at 160. After Canelo Alvarez fights Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Andrade at 160, at 168. And then they can meet at a catch weight at 160 for the biggest fight in boxing history. That is the way, not boxing history, the biggest fight in several years. Because Errol is the biggest star in 147 and below, and Canelo is probably I don't know what he is right now because he's been hiding himself on this app for the last couple years. But if you give him credit for the momentum that he had prior to his signing with DAZN, he was the biggest guy in boxing prior to him signing with DAZN. We don't know what he's going to actually be if he's not with DAZN because you haven't seen that in several years. However, I am sure that if they did a pay-per-view and they did the pay-per-view with Fox, that people would remember who Canelo Alvarez is pretty quick, and the fight would do mega money. And then both of these guys can go off into the sunset however they want to go off into the sunset. And I don't blame Errol Spence at all if he can get a $100 million fight and stack that money up. I would love to see him fight Terrence Crawford first, but Terrence Crawford has to, at least in his verbiage, change it. Pick up the phone with Errol. I don't know what he got to do. Say, hey, man, how are we going to get this fight made? Because right now, with Canelo saying things like this, and Errol's definitely going to hear what Eddie Reynoso has to say, dog, he may be looking like, yeah, man, I could fight you. Yeah, that 30 million is looking really good with you, but that 100 million over there is looking a little bit better, man. So I'll catch you after I do this, right? So anyway, we'll see how it plays out, but I'm glad that Canelo and Eddie Reynoso aren't just out there just acting like they can't count, okay? But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what yours is, and with that, I'm out. Peace.